Hey guys, welcome back to Upside Down Data. This is a quick update about the current state of the UDPI risk indicators for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the 13 altcoins that we're monitoring so far. That number is continuing to grow. We're adding new risk indicators for new assets every week, so keep checking back as those get added. The UDPI stands for Upside Downside Potential Indicator. It's our in-house risk indicator here at Upside Down Data. It's also where we got the name for the channel. Upside Down Data comes from the Upside Downside Potential Indicator. And what the Upside Downside Potential Indicator is designed to do is to tell you when a particular asset has a relatively favorable versus relatively unfavorable risk-reward ratio at that given point in time. When it has a relatively favorable risk reward ratio, that means that there's a lot of upside potential and that there's also relatively limited downside potential. The downside potential at that point might be relatively played out. But in contrast, when an asset is relatively high risk, according to the UDPI, that means that it has relatively limited remaining upside potential, but much more remaining downside potential in the near future. The purpose of these short videos is to update you on where these 15 risk gauges stand, and specific to tell you which assets are relatively overvalued from the perspective of the UDPI, meaning that they have plenty of downside potential and relatively limited upside potential compared to other assets, and also which ones are relatively undervalued from the perspective of the model, meaning the opposite, that they have plenty of upside potential but maybe limited downside potential, particularly relative to other assets. So that's why we emphasize using multiple risk indicators at the same time, because if you're deciding which assets are more beneficial or less risky to buy or to hold, then comparing across assets is really going to be useful. The other thing that I'm going to do in this video is to zoom in on the ones that are relatively low risk. We're going to look at a chart for each of those. We're going to get a little bit more information about the trends that we're seeing on the UDPI, in addition to the raw output, these numbers that you see up on the screen. All right, so without further ado, here we have these 15 assets up here. And what you can see is that one of them in particular is particularly high risk. DOT is quite high risk relative to the others right now at 3.21. That's much higher than any of the others up on the screen. That does not mean that DOT has to turn around and start going to the downside. It could continue up. But the fact that it's higher risk than others means that it probably has less realistic upside potential for the near future than others do, and more realistic downside potential than others do, especially if the market were to correct, if Bitcoin were to drop, let's say it came back down to 60K or something like that, then higher risk assets like DOT might especially get punished from that. On the other hand, we've got 4 assets here that are actually pointed the other way. So when we're looking at the needles, what we want to do is find the ones that are pointed to the left, because that means that they are relatively low risk, higher upside potential than downside potential. And that's true of these 4, ADA, XRP, HBAR, and ALGO. So those 4 assets are worth watching right now, and I want to put them on your radar. But now I want to show you something that you can do with the UDPI that's kind of next level stuff here. In addition to what we've been doing in previous videos, now that we've identified these as relatively low risk, we can actually look at their charts. And so I'm going to pull up simple charts that just show you the last month of the UDPI readings for these 4 assets. And so here is that. We've got XRP on the left, HBAR, ALGO, and then on the right, we have ADA. And we're looking at the last 30 days of the UDPI for these 4 assets. And so we've already identified that these 4 assets are below the midpoint in terms of their UDPI risk. But now we can also see whether there's a trend happening. And what we can see when we look at it in terms of the last 30 days is that there are different shapes playing out here. You know, XRP and ADA on the sides, on the left and the right, respectively, have been kind of rounding and starting to grind up a bit. No steep moves to the upside, still very gradual. But in contrast, HBAR and Algorand have seen pretty dramatic reversals recently, quite sharp reversals, where they were in a downtrend, especially this downtrend on Algorand, which was quite steep. But then it bounced, and now it appears that there's an uptrend forming, possibly. What we know from, looking at the UDPI across assets in the past is that these reversal points tend to be pretty predictive of moves to the upside. When you see this sharp bounce on the chart, like you're seeing right now on HBAR, right around November 5th or 6th, and on Algorand a little bit earlier, maybe November 3rd or 4th, then that tends to precede moves to the upside. And so we like to see these reversals, these bounces. We're going to have to continue to monitor HBAR and ALGO to see what happens. But those chart formations that we're seeing, combined with the fact that they're still below the midpoint, so they've reversed, or at least it looks like they're in the process of reversing and potentially forming an uptrend on the UDPI, but they're still below the midpoint, still relatively low risk. That's a nice combination, guys. That's a good thing to see. So I would really encourage you to keep HBAR and ALGO, in addition to XRP and ADA, but particularly HBAR and ALGO based on these charts on your radar. Don't be surprised if you see them playing some catch up to the market and performing well in the next period of time, days, weeks, that sort of thing. So if you guys find this valuable, subscribe to the channel, turn on your notifications, give the video a like. That really helps us with the algorithm. It helps us to reach more people. It doesn't take too much time out of your day. We'd really appreciate if you guys could do that. And lastly, follow us on Twitter at Upside Down Data. That's all for now. See you next time. Remember, with the UDPI, we are all going to make it.